Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the second lecture of the series of the 5th Critical Festival for Critical Culture, which this year, under the conditions posed by the coronavirus crisis, we have to organize through online tools. Tonight, we have the honor to host Џули Реше, who at present is in Tumen, Russia, and will speak on spreading of the virus of love and death, actually a quite provoking title. I will firstly present Đuli and then will give the floor to her. Đuli is a professor of philosophy and the director of the Institute of Psychoanalysis at the Global Center for Advanced Studies, from where last year we hosted also Creston Davis, who is a co-founder of the GCAS. But Đuli is also a professor at the School for Advanced Studies in Russia and Siberia. At the GCAS, Đuli teaches online seminars on subjects such as philosophy and psychoanalysis. She has studied psychology at University of Oxford and has received a PhD from the Institute of Philosophy of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts, which, as we know in the Balkans, is a leading center of the study of philosophically oriented psychoanalysis. She studied under the supervision of Alenka Jupančić, who is one of the key theorists of modern psychoanalysis. Đuli until now has authored 2 books and over 100 academic and popular articles. Her recent book, which is called Introduction to Philosophy, The Plasticity of Everyday Life, was a bestseller in Russia and has been longlisted for an Alexanдар Pјатигорски award. In her abstract for today's lecture, Đuli stresses out the problem of association of collective love and solidarity with life-sustaining feelings of happiness, joy, and fulfillment. Then she asks, what if such an association is an illusion that actually threatens collective love and solidarity? When posed like this, her thesis in the abstract, we can see an opening of a political question and even an ethical one regarding the contemporary practices of self-centered joy, happiness, and well-being, one which also Badju has criticized often through his theories of the subject. She then moves in her abstract to say that love doesn't make you happy. It requires genuine caring, effort, self-sacrifice, and the ability to share the pain and suffering of others. It hurts and destroys you, bringing you closer to death rather than making you more alive. Her thesis of today's lecture thus directly relates to this year's Crik Festival topic, which aims to reaffirm fragility and finitude as the basis of constructing a collective freedom and socialism. Further, Đuli's work on necropsychoanalysis, issues of love, sexuality, affection, and relationships provide an interesting thinking which, in the fashion of the Ljubljana school, connects immediately with our everyday life in the contemporary political predicament and tries to reframe and reposition some of the most important concepts of philosophical and psychoanalytical thinking. At the end of this introduction, I just want to remind you all that you can post your possible questions and comments on the live stream on our Facebook page. And at the end of Đuli's lecture, I will collect them and pose them to Đuli. So now I will give the floor to Đuli. Đuli, there you go.
Thank you. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for introduction and thank you for inviting me, Artan. Can you see my screen? Yes. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to spread the virus of love and death. I will try to. And for me, I do understand love as death. So they're kind of almost same thing. So it's not too late to switch off, to change your mind, not to watch it. But anyway, if you're here, some of you are still here, I'm going to try to spread this virus. So the first thing that I argue with in psychoanalysis is, you can see it in many quotes from Freud, especially, for example, in this one, that Freud thinks of individual and thinks about society under the framework of the program of a pleasure principle. So this is the way he perceived the and his understanding of how individual develops, how society forms. He think about it under the framework of the pleasure principle. He has a book beyond the pleasure principle, but still, in my view, and not only in my view, he actually fails to go beyond the pleasure principle, even though it was kind of his idea to go beyond it. So this is, I perceive it as unfinished project, Freud's project, that I'm trying to, not only me, there are some people who are trying to actually fulfill this project, actually to think individual outside of the frame of a pleasure principle. So basic idea for Freud, and Freud in popular view, of course, there are in Freud himself, he contradicts himself, and in other developments of psychoanalysis, there are lots of streams of thought that contradict this basic idea that thinking human being within the framework of pleasure principle of happiness, program of happiness. But still, in my view, all of them are not radical enough, except for mine. So, and in Freud, especially in this, in his popularized version, human being is initially egoistic. Human being, infants are born narcissistic. We start from the narcissistic basis. And with this idea, actually what goes together with this idea is idea that we are not social. I mean, we are social for Freud, but it's something secondary. And sociality, he perceived, again, our sociality, that we start to socialize, that we need other people, we need to be united with other people. He perceived it as a secondary thing. It's still within the frame of pleasure principle. Still the pleasure principle, what we want is personal happiness. What we want is pleasure. We kind of have to, because of the cultural circumstances, we have to sacrifice initially our pleasure, egoistic and narcissistic tendencies, but only in accordance with reality principle. Reality principle is Freud's term. It sounds very good, but it's not good. It's the other version of the pleasure principle, just realistic, how to get pleasure by not being still immersed into reality. So pleasure principle still at work in a reality principle. And reality principle claims that we need, within the cultural conditions, we need to sacrifice our egoistic needs in order to attain happiness, start to be social, sacrifice ourselves in order to be, in order to have this realistic happiness. So still it's within the initial idea that human beings are initially egoistic, separated, and then they kind of sacrifice the part of themselves in order to be at least happy in this way. So it's still within, we still see human being as first separated, as second, as someone who strives for happiness. And it's not only Freud. I mean, Freud is dead. It's nothing to bother with Freud, but it's us. It's still, it's very powerful framework within which the neuroscience works, all the science that consider human beings, and psychoanalysis, contemporary psychoanalysis to a large extent as well. And this is how we actually intuitively perceive ourselves on the West. This is how we think about ourselves if you don't put some additional thinking. So it's not just Freud, it's Freud in us. It's maybe something that Freud represented with his thinking. And this is what I'm trying to fight. And to fight it, there are lots of, like, to fight the idea that we are initially egoistic, right? That we are not social, but social in a secondary way, kind of. And to fight it, I figure out that it's better to do it not through philosophy, because in philosophy we have many people thinkers who were elaborating idea that we are social. We know about Buber, who claims that this idea of I, you, I, though, that there is no I, that I is other people. We have Levinas, but all of those guys are perceived, because it's philosophy, and they are perceived as kind of their philosophy as mysticism. So no one actually, we like it, we because it's romantic, and interesting, but we don't perceive it seriously. Like it's, especially if a woman will talk about it, it will be perceived as cute, but everyone will agree, but no one will actually take it seriously. So I figure out the way to do it through neuroscience, contemporary neuroscience that actually has some good research, better than Buber, because maybe Buber is better in elaborating it from philosophical side, but still it's like science is still what we believe, right? We can see it, we can touch it. There's some serious people with serious scientific methods working on it. So one study that I'm amazed with is the study that was conducted recently in University of Cambridge, Baby Link lab. So what they did, they measured, they were using dual EEG technology testing on the mother and on her infant while they were interacting. So in certain situation of mother-child, mother-baby interaction. And I really like their hats. But that's not the best thing about the research. So the best thing that what they came up with, it turned out that actually when mother and child interact in some situation of emotional involvement, of social learning, their brain work, those two brains work in tandem. They work like a single unit. So those researchers suggested that there is interpersonal neuronal connectivity. And within the normal framework of neuroscience, what we measure, because we have this perspective of individual and neuroscience still operating within it, like there is a brain and it works, there are neurons, there are different processes of formation of memory, knowledge, habits, whatever, and they just were not capable to see that it's not just the brain. They were not capable to see the very reality of this brain is connected, is a part of certain unity. It's not the single thing. You can't just take it out of this unity and elaborate on it in this way. So this EEG technology that they came to mind, someone's mind, that it's actually it's possible to test two brains at the same time while they're interacting, and they saw this interpersonal, not instead of intrapersonal reality, neuronal connectivity. So their brain were actually working as one single organism, as one single unity, and as a mega network, we can say. So we are physically, not only metaphorically, like in Buber, like in Levinas, connected with others. We are really connected, physically connected with others. Our brains work as a single organism. And even maybe to make one step further, there is no single organisms, right? It's just the way of thinking, in kind of illusion that we impose on ourselves. So there is this intrapersonal connectivity, like the whole new world that we are not able to see before. We were locked within the framework of individual brain, of brain that is disconnected from others. And now we know, now we have research, but it actually doesn't go far enough in its interpretation, because interpretation is still locked kind of within the framework of individual. So Victoria Leon, she is the leader of this lab, of this research. She claims that in one of her interviews that when we synchronize and connect neurally with others, we are also opening ourselves to receiving information and influence from them. So she actually shows that that we are this physical openness. We are open, we are connected. And the thing with this research is maybe because of the name, there is a baby in the name of a lab, and there's a woman who is who is leading this research. In popular media, in those who popularize scientific research, it was still perceived within the framework that, oh, it's about babies, that we need to spend time. It's so beautiful. We need to spend more time with babies because we influence them. So this research was reduced to babies, to this cuteness, and that in order to develop self-sufficient individual, we need to take better care of babies. So it wasn't still perceived seriously enough. Like it didn't make this change that it's has the capacity to make. And we can also, and here we can see that the way she's trying to interpret it, there are us, we still start from us, human being, and we are open as a secondary thing. Like we are open to the influence. We are still separate brain, but we have ability to interact. It's still not perspective that I want. It's still not that interaction comes first and then individuality, or that individuality is nothing else than interaction. Even though this research has capacity to overthrow this perspective, it still doesn't go, still kind of get captured within the regular perspective, unfortunately. And we can go back here to radicalize baby thing, to a famous Winnicott claim that there is no such thing as a baby, which means that Winnicott already claimed that there is no such thing as a baby, right? That baby is imaginary unity. Baby would not survive if there is no one to take care of him. Of course, there is no one to give birth to them as well, but babies need to be taken care of. Babies are the result of someone taking care of them, of someone teaching them. They acquire language from interacting of others. So according to this research, they are this interaction. They are nowhere inside of this interaction. So for Winnicott, this claim was about mother-child unit, but it's not. So it's still, we know about Winnicott as the someone who is involved in pedagogy, still about babies. Babies are cute, we need to pay attention to them. But it's we are always those babies, right? We are never separated. So when we claim that we are open to interactions with others, so we are involved in this interpersonal connectivity, who are we, right? There is no one there separate person to start with, because who we are is already what you were taught in this case, but by your mother. It still is already is a mutual connectivity with your mothers. And through this, it's not only mother and not only two people, it's like the scale of the whole world, right? So we still have trouble starting with this interconnectivity. There is no such thing as a baby, but there is also no such thing as an individual that we can separate from others and consider as a separate unity. I mean, we can, but it's a secondary process, and it's just the framework of consideration. So here we can talk about basic interconnectivity, that it's not that human being, infant, is born as a separate narcissistic creature, and then it gets socialized, then it gets socialized with others, starts to be part of society. That we start from this interconnectivity, we are this the interconnectivity itself. So individuality as a secondary, as a part maybe of the unit of interconnectivity, not the secondary, not the initial thing. So there is other research which is also great, and I discuss it a lot. The Matthew Lieberman research, he's from UCLA, and he claims he is quite famous socio-cognitive neuroscientist, and in his research he came to conclusion that our brain, we are radically social. So we are extremely social beings. Because when they measured brain activity, it turned out that social mode of our brain, this is the mode when we think about others, when we think about our connections with others, or just about others. This is default mode of our brain. So when we don't orient our thinking somewhere, when we don't don't set the aim to think about some particular thing. We don't need to use some analytical thinking and stuff. We naturally turn to this default mode of our brain, which is social. So if you try not to think about anything, you will end up thinking about someone else, or about your connections with someone else, about society, about others who you care a lot. So this is not non-thinking for humans, is thinking about others, is operating in this basic mode of connections with others. When we don't think, when we are not active, not actively separating ourselves, directing our attention to something, we are falling back into this basic connectivity. And so this way his research is great. And he also claimed, so this basic mode, we are born with this basic mode of thinking, and we never actually radically change. So we never, it remains a basic mode of our thinking until the end of our lives. He also, Lieberman, he also explained this by trying to invert, to change a bit Maslow pyramids of needs. So for Maslow, initial need is the need for physiological need, like need for food, need for shelter, and we need this just to survive. It's our basic need. And Lieberman explains that for us, love and belonging, so connectivity with others, is much more, it's actually on the bottom, it's much more important for survival than food. Why? Because if we think about infants, babies who need to be taken care of, especially in humans, for quite a long time, because before they will develop their basic skills like walking or eating unprocessed food, they need someone to take care of them for a couple of years, to sacrifice to them. They need care of someone. They are this care at this time. So if they will not develop, if they will not develop the proximity with others, if they will not cry by calling, getting attached to others, they will not survive, because no one will take care of them. Well, people will, but just because they have this ability to sacrifice themselves, ability to take care, ability to think about someone else before thinking of themselves. So, but it's of course Maslow pyramid still, and Lieberman to a certain extent, still remain within the perspective that it's a needs of individual. It's still individual first, and then plus radical need of an individual to be social, need in others. It's still, even if it's radical need, even if it's basic, we need to satisfy it. We still start from individual and satisfaction of their needs, right? It's still, even though this research still has potential to overthrow this idea, and this is what it's doing, overthrowing this idea, but still keeping itself in the framework of that individuality is first, and then individuality is social. So then we need to add sociality to this. But he has a great idea, Lieberman has a great idea that suggesting the image of the mega network of brains, that we are not separate brain, that we are connected, forming some kind of mega network of brains, and each separate brain is just the point of activity of this interconnectivity. So it does have this potential to overthrow the idea with individuality first. And the other thing is, why I like Lieberman a lot, is social pain, the idea that he develops. Although sometimes he's too romantic, claiming that just because we know, so his book on sociality was a bestseller, and you can't write such kind of book if you don't offer some kind of hope to people, right? On some directions what to do to be happy. So he claims that in order to be, that this is our superpower, we need to be more social, we're going to be happy. But there is a secret message of his research and of his book if you read it closely, it's totally opposite. Because of the social pain. So how this sociality is secured? How do we know that at the bottom of this pyramid is the social need? Because if we don't receive it, if we are separated from other, we feel pain and social pain. But it's not a metaphorical language when we talk about broken heart. The pain of a broken heart, we use it as a metaphor, and Lieberman showed that this social pain is actually real. It works. It works using the same neuronal activity similar to physical pain, like a pain of a broken neck. And to prove it, you actually know this, because when I ask you, it's Lieberman's example, when I ask you to recollect one of your most painful experience in your life, you won't talk about the pain of a broken neck or whatever physical pain that you suffered. You will, of course, talk about someone who you cared about died, or some social rejection or something social, because this is pain as well. This pain hurts us the most. And for Lieberman, this is how nature, evolution secured, because it's so important for us. This is how the mechanism of nature to secure our connectivity, to secure us being together, that we react when something wrong with the social body. And this is his term as well. When something is broken, when there is some cracks in it, we feel pain. And this is the mechanism that we need to, it signals us that we need to pay attention to this part and to heal it if we can, but sometimes we can't. And it might seem as a flaw in our nature, but it's not, because it actually secures our survival. It's something that is most important for our survival, to stay connected. And the idea here, so why is it not the story without happy ending? That and the love, you feel love as the next message. You feel love as something that hurts. So you probably know the song that Love Hurts, but you probably know it from your experience. But there is no other way to feel love without feeling that it hurts. You know that you need someone, you know that you are attached to someone, because when they are away, you feel that you need them to be near you. And there is no way to feel it the other way. You might feel happy when they are near you, and your connectivity is everything is okay with it. But this happiness, it might not come, or it might come as a secondary, as just the feeling of relief from pain. And then pain comes again, and when there is no pain, there is actually no need for this person. So love actually comes as a feeling of pain, and even in not only in a relationship that doesn't go well, but actually in relationship that do go well. For example, for many reasons, again, because the feeling that you miss someone, even if they're there next to you, it's not enough. But also because you feel you care about someone, you feel their pain, you as if it's your pain, and it's not as if it is your pain now, right? Because you form a unity with this person. And you actually and the more people you love, right, the more open you are to them, the more pain you feel. And we remember about Jesus Christ with his love to humanity, or that God loves to humanity through sacrificing him. So this is how it ends. It just, you sacrifice yourself at the end. There is no you, right? There is nothing. So death is at the bottom of love. And so love, this is one of the way how one can explain that love is death, is self-sacrifice. But so love hurts because we care about someone, because we need someone, but also love hurts when also not only individual love, but also the common love is formed at this way. Because if the love is, if pain, social pain, is a point of connection, this is actually the point of social connection with others. So you feel the pain of others, you care about others. And also when you are in love and you feel love, you open up to others. And be open up. There is no way again to check if you're open enough. Only when it starts to hurt, you understand that you're open. Only when someone opinion about you start to matter, and matter meaning hurt you, traumatizes you, it's important to you, maybe a bit, but still. And or you just worry about the opinion about you because you care. And imagine if you care about each opinion and each person, it's impossible, right? But that's the tragical dimension of love. So what Lieberman trying to trick us to suggest that we're going to have happiness at the end, it's not true. And developing the sociality, which I still think we need to do, even if it hurts the most, even if it will hurt more, this is what we have to do. And it's kind of within the framework of idea going beyond pleasure principle. It's actually falls under it. So those people who develop idea in political philosophy, idea of love, of common love, are most notably Hart and Negri, mostly Michael Hart. They claim, they try to bring back to think about common love as a political concept, claiming that it was stolen by priests, poets, and psychoanalysts, and it's not wise to leave the concept of love to those people, which I totally agree. Poets, for the reason that it's mystical language, and it's not maybe taken seriously, not seriously enough to be considered as political concept. Maybe it's a bad thing, but still, this is how things are. Priests and psychoanalysts, again, lots of mysticism here, but and both, as my criticism, both kind of impose some kind of rigid ideology, especially in the psychoanalytic popular version that serves, according to Foucault, almost precisely the function of pastorhood, of Christian idea of imposition of certain worldview and domination, and not a good things. So no priests, no poets, but this is how they try to revitalize the idea of common love, to bring it back into politics, into thinking about sociality, and make it serious again. And it's a pity that love is considered, first of all, as associated in the West with romantic love, as love between two people. That's actually what they're trying to fight here. And why they choose love? Why not the friendship, for example? Because I like word friendship as well, but the connotations are normally that, you know, we just friends, nothing serious. But somehow, sometimes this only friends, you know, that it might last longer than some romantic involvement, even if initial feeling is very strong, but it's not durable enough because of this initial force. But again, not friendship. Their reason why not friendship, because friendship doesn't require self-transformation. So what they want to do with this common concept of common love is that present love as a common process of collective self-transformation, because love requires that we transform ourselves. It's not that much a feeling, you know, that just happens to you and you're a passive object and you feel need to someone, but this actually the main point for them, that it requires your transformation. It requires you to be transformed. It creates a new person out of you. It requires personal transformation. And this is how, by practicing common love, this is how society is preparing itself, might prepare itself for to be self-governed, to be revolutionary, so to involve itself into the revolutionary processes because of this aspect of transformation. The other thing I really like about, so we can talk, they actually mentioned that the previous political concept of love was in Christianity. So this is a kind of secular version of Christianity, because for Christians, God is love, but this is the love that actually people have to practice. But there are, of course, lots of problems with Christianity. So,
hi, Julie, can you listen to me?
Yes.
The video has been just interrupted for a while. Let's see what is the problem, and we will get back as soon as possible, possibly in a few minutes. Maybe there is a problem. Let's just let me see. Okay, I think now you can continue.
Okay, so yeah, common love and its secular version of love. The other thing that I really like about Hart and Negri in this concept of common love, that they are quite realistic in a way that they perceive everything, all the sociality, all the interconnectivity of multitude, of common, as a love. It's not that love that we have to attain someday, maybe we have to transform it in kind of a better version, but it was always love. So we were always connected. It was always this multitude, which kind of gives hope, but it doesn't actually give hope, because, for example, the opposite of love, according to them, is not hatred. It's not absence of love, because we are connected. We are this multitude already. Just there are some kind of distorted or corrupted versions of love, and this is what led them also to claim that, for example, the corrupted version of love, when the love is when we are unified in love, and when love is reduced to family, when love is reduced to nation, like in patriotism or fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, those are corrupted forms of love. Those forms of love that destroy, which is love always destroys, but it's kind of too much, right? So this would let them claim that even fascism, even populism, even religious fundamentalism are forms of love, but forms of love that went wrong, that went really wrong. So it kind of gives hope that love is always there. This is what how we survive. But at the same time, it takes this hope away, because everything we don't want to have again, everything we want to get rid of, it's also low. And they are quite romantic in the way that they have a hope that there is a possibility to create this uncorrupted form of love. But the thing is that staying within a certain love relationship with others, certain type of connectivity with others, I'm not sure there is a way to actually comprehend where it's going wrong. And this is the tragical situation of humanity. You never know, right? Because we can claim that some terrible thing like religious fundamentalism. For Negri and Hart, I like them because they actually show that this revolutionary process is painful. It's not in an habitual maybe way we perceive revolutionary processes as getting more and more happy, being more and more separated from each other in this way. But it presupposes pain, because for them it presupposes the abolition of identity together with abolition of nation, corporation, family, everything, all the habitual corrupted kind of love. It's a kind of love. It's also presupposes that it's you who is who represents these habits, who represents themselves this habitual way of leading life. So in this way, you can read more in the text that was translated about the criticism of identity politics. But this is one more aspect how revolution is painful, how it presupposes more pain, right? More than the situation before the revolutionary transformation. And the thing is, and it's not only in revolution, it's also, as we saw, in personal relationship, because this current idea, this positive psychology idea that perfect relationship are not painful and not traumatic, and the whole industry that actually makes money of psychotherapists and counselors, that by showing you, or you come into the conclusion that your relationship are toxic, and the more you reflect, the more toxic any relationship can get, the more traumatic. And the healthy relationship in such way that are perceived as something outside of pain, there is absence of relationship. But the trick is that you are not happy again, because outside of the relationship you still feel social pain because you are alone, you are separated. So there is no way to escape this pain. There's also only way, being human, only way to work to make this pain more socially useful, at least to comprehend your tragic situation, that it's no way out. Either you are in a healthy, I won't call it healthy because the notion of healthy relationship is already corrupted. But there is no way to escape this pain. So either you care about something and someone is caring about you, it still presupposes pain, or you are separated and self-sufficient, but it also presupposes the social pain. You're still social, just disconnected. So that's the tragicality of our position. And I really like the almost last thing that I want to talk about is Todd McGowan project of a political project of psychoanalysis. And there were many attempts of people theorists to marry Freud and Marxism, psychoanalysis and Marxism, but most of them, almost all of them, are still within the framework of pleasure principle, which is not totally different maybe to positive psychology, because positive psychology orients us towards individual happiness, promises that we can achieve this heaven of happiness if we lead our life in a correct way. This never happens. That's just a promise, an illusion. But Marxian psychoanalysis criticizes this popular kind of psychology, but by claiming that to get rid of suffering, to be happy for individual within the present order, means to surrender to this order, not to change it, just to adapt. It's like a killing of we destroy this individually oriented psychology, destroys revolutionary subject by making the subject happy within the present order. So the subject is not interested to change the order, just changing themselves. But the problem with psychoanalysis connected with Marxism, that they're still within the framework of a within the framework which they share with positive psychology and pleasure. This is the pleasure principle framework. They still perceive human as those who strive for happiness. But okay, they are fine with us being suffering now, being revolutionary now, but this is still in the name of the future society where we'll not suffer anymore. So Freud and Marxists are still, and it's quite Christian perspective that promises a heaven on earth. But the problem is that if you from Lieberman, we saw that if there is no pain, no social pain, there is no human, right? There is no humanity. It's by trying to get rid of pain, by trying to get rid of the suffering, not instead of modifying the suffering, we are as the way to get rid of humanity as such. So Marxists are better, those who are Freudian Marxists are better than positive psychologists, but still not perfect enough, because they still remain partially, at least, within the framework of the pleasure principle, which I'm trying to fight with. But Todd McGowan is great in the sense that he tries to destigmatize the concept of a death drive, because Freudo-Marxists normally tend to fight the death drive. The death drive, the way they interpreted it as aggressiveness or impulse to return to inorganic state. You can find it, this interpretation in Freud. But Todd McGowan claims that death drive is supposed to take the central position, and I agree with him that the central position in psychoanalysis, this is the heart of psychoanalysis, but he suggests to consider it in a different way, which also we can find it in Lacan. We can find it similar interpretation among many interpretations of Freud. In Freud himself, he understands it as a kind of a suffering that we endure during our lives. So this compulsion to repeat that Freud discovered, and that's something that lead him to concept of a death drive, that we are weird creatures, weird because for him, weird because he considers human under the framework of pleasure principle. Pleasure is all we want. And when he discovered the repetition compulsion, that for some reason we tend to repeat traumatic experiences. We tend to do something that traumatizes us, that goes totally in contrast with the pleasure principle. So, and later it turned out that who we are, I mean, within the perspective, if you put at the center, the death drive, it turned out that this is who we are, right? The death drive is not that we are weird in this way. This is who we are. Maybe we are weird when we are considered from the perspective of pleasure principle. So Todd McGowan relies on by trying to revitalize the death drive as a central to politics, he relies on modified version of Lacan, for Lacan. And here they come, actually psychoanalysis comes closer to this idea of that subject is secondary, it is just the illusion. Lacan, McGowan, in their reinterpretation, claim that initially subject is a lost subject, and it's initially post-traumatic. So it appears as a loss of itself. Some theorists understand it as a separation from the mother, right? As a trauma of separation. And your separation is an illusion. So considering that humans are driven by the death drive, it means that they are driven by repetition compulsion. And McGowan claims that so this illusion of you being separated, you actually sacrifice. So humans are driven by their need to sacrifice themselves to others, by sacrificing, by repeating this initial absence of themselves, by repeating the initial traumatic experience that they don't exist, by giving themselves to others. But the problem with McGowan, and even the title of his work, Enjoying What We Don't Have, is that even though it was all the cool ideas, he still preserves it as within the framework of pleasure principle, because we do it since we feel pleasure. And this idea of Lacanian jouissance, that there is a pleasure in pain and pain in pleasure, which I don't like this word because we translate it as a pleasure. It's still accent on the pleasure. It's still we want pleasure, but we just will sacrifice ourselves. We take this detour and then we feel pleasure. It's still aimed toward the pleasure, but they still don't get rid of this framework. And I think it's totally possible to think human being as not someone who strives for pleasure, because but as someone who genuinely has need to sacrifice themselves, not only has a need to sacrifice themselves, but is this sacrifice, right? Is the drive towards other and drive it to self-destruction. So McGowan claims that this repetition of sacrifice, of initial loss of you, sacrificing yourself to others, being this connection with others, creates a life worth living, but for him, you feel it as a pleasure. I suggest that we might feel it's not a pleasure, it's rather temporary relief from pain, from social pain, but it's not necessary that it will come, right? it's not necessary that it will end up in some kind of relief of pain. And it can, if it's a sacrifice that is sincere sacrifice, it might not end up in a pleasure, and it's not the pleasure that we want. And here McGowan is again in line with positive psychology, because in positive psychology we also see the recommendation in those self-help books that to be happy you have to help others, you have to be involved. So they kind of comprehend this principle too, but the problem is that it doesn't work that way. If you help others because you want to be happy, you're not helping others. You just, you know, if you sacrifice yourself because it's your need and it will make you happy, it's not the sacrifice, it's just you helping yourself. It's you still egoistic, you still within the framework. So positive psychology, it's funny because suggesting the way to happiness, it actually distracts you from happiness, and it ruins relationship, because when people expect happiness from relationship, they never work, because they don't get the happiness. They expect to be happy, someone doesn't make you happy, and you just break up. This is what now happens. So for some reason, and they proceed looking for totally non-toxic relationship, which means the absence of relationship. So that's the framework of positive psychology, and which McGowan preserves a bit again, because when we claim that we need this to sacrifice ourselves in order to be happy, in order to feel joy, it's not a sacrifice. Sacrifice presupposes that we totally the proper sacrifice, that we are outside of a program of pleasure principle. We are not those beings that want to be happy, maybe when we are weak or something, but that's not. And this is what I learned actually, not by just thinking of it, because I'm practicing psychologist and I see that that this framework is totally applicable to people. So it's mostly people make me think that way. It's not a pleasure that they want. No one wants life to have eternal pleasure in life. Maybe as a rest from something meaningful, but this meaningful where they sacrifice themselves, where they feel heroes. This is what driving them, what constitutes the goal of life. And I was again accused, maybe not accused, but suggested that I'm propagating abusive relationship with people between each other, because if we have this need to sacrifice ourselves, and it's a basic one, so it might look that I'm propagating here totalitarian relationship or abusive relationship when one is turned into objects, totally sacrificing themselves. And according to Todd McGowan, they're supposed to be absolutely happy because they're fulfilling their basic need. But it's not so. I mean, it's so in a way, because the human relationship as such, they are not totally opposite to what we call abusive, because intimacy is traumatic, it hurts, right? Maybe doesn't not just not abuses you, but hurts, not something opposite, but because you care, because it's important, because you open up to other people, because you care about them and you sacrifice yourself to them. But I also don't agree with this critics, because in order to sacrifice yourself properly, there's supposed to be someone you sacrifice in it. So you're supposed to have someone, you're supposed to have you to sacrifice yourself. If you are reduced within the real abusive relationship, you are reduced to totalitarian relationship, you are reduced to object. There is nothing you can give because you are demanded to give, right? They are taken from you. To sacrifice properly, to fulfill this goal of your life, it has to be your choice. You need to be individual. You need to it's the difference between giving someone a present. To be a present, it has to be, you have to possess it first. So this present is you have to be this individual, and it has to be a conscious decision how you want to give it, that you thought about person. But if someone is taking the same act, someone is just taking this thing from you, it's not a present, it's just the abolition of the whole process of the whole idea. So there are good, don't have time to discuss, but there are good evolutionary theories that claim that self-awareness, individual awareness, self-consciousness appeared in evolution as a more profound, more efficient way of cooperation. So in this way, we can think about individual as a more efficient, as a type of cooperation, right? And nothing else. If you don't fulfill this, if you don't fulfill this goal, we're not fulfilling our human, predisposition. So it is sacrifice, but it's not this totalitarian thing that we need to be reduced to object. It's on the contrary. The sacrifice presupposes that you exist as a self, but you maybe it's illusion, but it has to exist to create a society, to create the love, common love relationship. And also, I was asked, maybe I have a minute to talk about my project, because this is what I'm practicing. So the idea of, I'm gonna finish soon. So my project is negative psychoanalysis, but I had the free session, and not only free sessions, and it didn't turn out right. So idea is that psychoanalysis as pro-social, not exactly Freud or Marxism, but that promise happiness of society at the end instead of happiness of individual. But this idea, Negri and Hart's idea of common love, that tries to promote the pro-social tendencies in the individual, and not trying to get rid of pain to promise happiness, but just works with this pain. And my recent project that lasts for 2 months, and the first stage of it was to, well, the free session didn't work for many reasons. Freud was partially correct that it doesn't work well. And initially I thought that he needs money, and this is why he claims so. But it turned out that he's true. I mean, that this is true, but maybe not because of the money. That the idea here is that, not the idea, but the thing here is that there's people supposed to pay. So it's supposed to be exchange. Otherwise, if it's free, people are reduced to the object, like Nietzsche and critics of pity. They are reduced to the object of pity. And it's not equal relationship. It's not the process of self-transformation. There's someone, me, who feels very kind and good, helping others, but it's not, it's still hierarchical. So it's not the way I want it. So I came up with the idea that I can give free sessions and start to give them again, but only in exchange to people. Those who I give sessions will give sessions in exchange to whoever wants the session from them. And again, to those to whom they give those sessions in exchange to mine sessions have to provide the session in exchange of this session. And it's like endless process. So we are going to develop the platform soon where people can exchange those sessions. And I think that's, of course, it's total profanation of psychoanalysis, because those people are not professional. But Freud has idea of lay psychoanalysis, and he was against thought that you necessarily need to have a medical degree to practice it. So it's basically the idea of a setting or some basic rules, basic instruction that people can actually share this practice with each other, and they can in this way sacrifice themselves. So this is the practice, hopefully, of Negri and Hart idea of involvement, of commons, of collective involvement in self-transformation. You just add the setting there, which is psychoanalytic setting, which is very good and works good. It's we already have it in society. It's called friendship. We support each other, we are friends, but maybe it's a good idea to add some other kind of a framework to all this and see how it will work. And it's my project in, it's not exactly my suicidal project, because the idea is that I did my work in creating it, and the project doesn't need me anymore. So it's just people exchanging their, maybe just providing psychoanalytical sessions to each other and helping each other, but also or maybe sharing their professional experience. And we will develop it, this platform on summer. Okay, I'm done here. Thank you so much. Artan, do I have to answer questions?
Yes, there are 2 questions from me and 3 questions from the people who have posted on the on the comments. I mean, I like what you commented on the question of love, and I took notes of quoting you that you said that this is a tragic situation of humanity in regards to love, and that love, we should view love as from an anti-romantic point of view, which is something that can always go in this and that direction. But does that, to you, according to you, situate love in this psychoanalytically, in this kernel which is undefined within the subject, which can then be manifested in different modes, which have no whatsoever relation to ethical or political principles? And in that case, should we disregard all the authors who have talked about love and also friendship, having in mind here in the reader as well, which connects somehow with love, but not the erotic one, but different modes of love, which then you would claim that psychoanalytically the source, the kernel of love, is something that is undefined, which can also lead to fascism. And then my question is, what kind of relations does one pursue in a community, or what is the name of such a relation, which can be beneficial for sort of revolutionary projects?
Well, I like so far Negri and Hard, and it's totally not erotic, because trying to argue with everything that is basic for psychoanalysis, and they're just trying to check if still something will remain. This is the pleasure principle, and this is the start that we begin with sexuality. That's the Freudian Marxist way to liberation, that we need to liberate sexuality. But we see that it's actually the problem, maybe not the solution sometimes. Doesn't lead to a free society, but maybe the basic of us being free. It's not important. But so Negri and Hard, still they don't persuade me to, in this. So I still perceive love as something that, you need to justify. It's still not good enough to be political. And also I agree with the previous lecture that political itself, it's not exactly what we want. And I believe that the solution or something new, collective, will come from outside of the way we got used to fight now. The way we got used to frame our fight. And I see it coming now, for example, because this situation is weird currently. All the connectivity, even though we were distance physically, but at the same time, this new weird situation made us created new types of connection, new types of solidarity. Solidarity is another good word, but it has disadvantages, because it presupposes that we are agreeing in something, but they are against someone, unfortunately. But yeah, emotionally, I like solidarity, but there are still lack of let's not totally agree with it. And well, what I'm trying to show is, I'm not trying to show a solution, because I think that the solution is the worst thing. Not trying to show, so by showing the tragicality, the impasse, I think it might be a solution, not to look for solution, because this is, and people won't listen to it, because people listen much better when you give them a hope, when you showing them that everything is going to be okay if they do it. But that's actually there is a danger in it. So but just showing that it's maybe it's a good news that this love, this thing, sociality was always there, that people were not never were egoistic creatures, that they were always connected, and wherever they did it in the name of love, even the most corrupted forms. It might sound like a good thing, like giving a hope, but at the same time, it doesn't give a hope, because we don't know at what point it gets corrupted. But maybe Deleuzian and Guattari's solution that, just be careful. Mind that you might turn out to be fascist anytime, in whatever best thing you do. Just keep in mind, and this tragical worldview, and also trying to develop for his book with Malabo, the idea of depressive revolution. And for some reason, my students really like the idea of depressive revolution, because we normally think that revolution is like enthusiastic, happy and stuff. But it might last for a while, but the normal subject
of passions and
yeah, but then the depression comes, and depression is apathy. You don't see the meaning. You don't want to do anything. But there's you know, to make some real changes, you need to work with this. You need to, depression is all is left. You know, you don't have hope. It went wrong, but in this state, if you figure out the way how to transform the society being in this state, and for me, depression is also the connection with reality when you actually realize that. Nor illusions, but how to be disillusioned, be depressed, and still be revolutionary. That's kind of a question I'm trying to work with.
I think that question connects with the other point that you talked today. You said that you have, in order to sacrifice, you have to be, you should not be objectivized in a relationship. Basically, that means an absolute freedom of sacrificing with the fullest of your psychic, subjective, political potential, and being fully yourself to give yourself away to someone else in the context of love. But then how do you conceive of the process of continuing in the being while you are destroying yourself for the other person? Does the limitation of this prospect, is the limitation of this prospect the limit of also the personal being, and then the extension to the sociality, to the political commune, and which would be the political conditions that would allow for this continuation of further sacrificing and further destruction? I mean, what is the process that allows for self-destruction, but still self-maintaining, that you could continue to self-destroy yourself, in that sense, continue to love?
Yeah, I think you just gave an answer, and since all of us are alive, we somehow managed to do it, right? Because life is extended suicide. You do sacrifice yourself, you go through this pain, but you're still physically at least alive. And so it is this suicidal dance. There is this sacrifice, and if you do the love, at the bottom of love, any kind of love, is death. You just disappear. So the trick is not to go to the end, but this also hypocrisy, a human another tragedy, that wherever you do, it's still hypocrisy, because the proper act of sacrifice is to destroy yourself. Since you are alive, you're not doing it right. And this is what, there is something awful in everything great you do. And we tend to, just not to pay attention to it. And this is how we are. So while we are alive, we are those not totally sincere with ourselves. And yes, so just dance around death and be. And this is what we do, right? And this research with babies, it looks cute, but it's also very violent. It's not that we love each other. It means that by talking to someone, me talking to you, this neuroplasticity means I'm influencing you while I'm talking, and I'm changing your neuronal pathways in such a way that there is nothing you can do to change it back. If you will forget what I just said, it will still be a secondary destruction. So you will, the state after the after I
will be a labor for the destruction of it.
Yes, so this is all not so cute, especially with babies and mothers, with imposition of knowledge. Was this, and you are currently sacrificing yourself listening to me, and I'm in my turn when I'm listening to you. So for me, emancipation, I know it's a totally misogynistic stereotype that the woman is the one who sacrifices, and we to liberate passive objects who's supposed to sacrifice. But liberation is still, there is some criticism of feminism that it's kind of takes the male ideal that we need to be self-sufficient, not sacrificing ourselves, liberating ourselves. But it's also stereotype, of course. But for me, the liberation is more like be within this stereotype of woman, sacrificing ourselves to each other equally. It's not equality in absence of sacrifice, but in the in the equality in precisely the sacrifice. So not that women, it is stereotype. I understand, just as a way to explain things. Not that people need to become this man pattern behavior, but woman pattern.
You're bringing out this, because you mentioned both words, emancipation and liberation. This is according to Negri and Hart. You know, there is this distinction between emancipation that leads to identitary politics, which have to self-abolish themselves, and liberation, which is an abolishment of every sort of identity, although starting from an identitary position. And in that sense, I mean, when you talked before, I will have to pose these two questions. When you spoke of the necessity of building relationships and of belonging from the very birth and from being brought up, how does that look? How does that evade the falling into some sort of identitary positions and identitary belongings, which are religious, nationalistic, that you mentioned already? That belonging per se is posed as a psychological need, but then how do you politically separate, and where is the ethical dimension of political separation of belonging to this or that particular group, which might be regressive or progressive?
Yeah, I like, that's why I wrote about it, the Negri and Hart separation of liberation and emancipation. So liberation is, emancipation is emancipation of identity, liberation is when there is no identity. But I think they're too romantic in this, and when total abolition of identity leads to that you are just don't exist, it's the love gone totally wrong, because there is no you anymore. So it may be the perfect romantic perfect idea, but in reality it will lead just to death. And they are quite careful with identity politics. They claim that in order to be the first stage supposed to be that you need to still retain the identity, but only later to sacrifice it. And I think that liberated woman, for example, is already the monster. It's not a woman as such. It's already transformed, even though there is good criticism of the very concept of woman. For example, Monique Wittig, that woman as such can't be liberated because it's concept invented by men and it only exists within heterosexual relationship, and it exists as a secondary. It's like to emancipate slave and proceed calling them slaves. But on the other hand, this is true on one side, but so those creatures who are emancipated, those monsters, they're not going to be women anymore. But on the other side, women who is emancipated, it is this monster. So it's a weird woman. It's not woman that doesn't coincide with itself. So it's not that I'm suggesting some new radical way. I'm just suggesting that process is not much different from what we had before, what we have now, and we're doing okay. Just we need to not to like proceed, not counting that the happy ending is near. That there are some to look for some solutions, quick solutions that will bring us to a happy ending. There's going to be never a happy ending, right? And we just need to do it because we need to do it. And we all, I'm sure that we understand it. And even, you know, this esoteric, whatever you take, like esoteric Greek initiation, ancient Greek initiation process, and esoteric Buddhism, esoteric, I know word esoteric is terrible, Christianity, and what people like initial, the knowledge that you get at the end. The knowledge that you get at the end in Christianity, that there is no like idea of heaven is for lay audience, right? There is nothing. You just suffer, you sacrifice, and it's tragedy because Jesus didn't end up in heaven. And this is how he did it, right? Because the whole story was that he sacrificed himself. He ended up in heaven. It's not he didn't sacrifice himself. Was for heaven? What's what? So the sacral initial knowledge, first of all, it's absence of knowledge. It's every time about death. It's every time about just suffering, and that's it. And in psychoanalysis, we can also see it in Freud. We can see it. Well, Bloch has idea of a sacred psychoanalysis, but it's contrary to sacred because it offers hope. It offers all the kind of Christian stuff that is hidden from psychoanalysis, but still remain there. There is a hope for unity, for happy society and stuff, Christian idea. But in psychoanalysis, we see even in Freud himself was idea of a death drive, that this is something he talks about. It changes totally his perspective, but his in following works, he's trying to conceal it. Sometimes he's claiming that he is supposed to be brave enough not to provide consolation, not to provide hope, but he doesn't follow it exactly every time. So he still provides hope, maybe because no one will listen. So in the bottom of the knowledge, every type of knowledge, even Christianity, which I have criticized a lot, there is still the what I like the most, presented as a secret.
Thank you. So maybe we can take one of the questions, or rather a comment, from Venka Simoska. She says, Julie, thanks for the super exciting talk, but it seems to me that you select one line of thought to criticize while neglecting the complexity in the field of happiness, 3 dots. The line you're talking about is the so-called hedonic, like Epicurus, pleasure over pain, but you ignore the eudaimonic, Aristotle line of thought in that happiness research, which share many of your points.
Yeah, I want to correct this, that not only one line of thought that I'm missing a lot of them. And it's true that, I was super critical about the striving for happiness, and it's a good at least, and as the experiment to see this from this perspective, to criticize it perspective, and to be negative, just negative. And it went great, but if you think about it, yes, there are different types of how happiness is defined. And in the Greek eudaimonia wasn't the happiness, the hedonistic utilitarian happiness. It was happiness of when you sacrifice yourself, you do right thing, and then you just feel good. You don't feel this what is now associated with serotonin and stuff. And also, even in this hedonistic understanding of happiness, what Alenka Župančić criticizes, the idea of biopolitics, that we all need to be happy. Happy is an ethical ideal, but if it's ethical ideal, we within this egoistic happiness, by trying to be happy, we're just trying to fit. And you sometimes, when someone who cares about you asking you how are you, saying that you're fine, just not to bother them with you. So and also happiness that people want, it's it's happiness that they want for others, not for themselves. And the idea of revolution is not happy, I want to be happy, just participate in a revolution, then I'll be happy. Just happiness that you want for others. You want others to be happy, even if they won't be happy.
Yes, but Julie, I want to interrupt you here, but because it seems that there might be a chain of people who go through this sort of sacrifice and unhappiness, and the whole, it seems at one point like a dispersion of a chain of tragedies, that you want the happiness for others, and for this purpose you sacrifice yourselves, and then the same replicates with others. And then where is the domain when someone feels happy? Because this has to be reciprocal, that we don't have someone is a provider of sacrificing, and then you have the other one by the same ethical principles who is also sacrificing towards other one, and then we have a chain of sacrifices for the other one. And where does this other reside? The other one who should be happy, or it's just a multiplication of sadnesses?
Yeah, I like it if you put it this way. Yeah, so you actually answered some kind of question in a really good way. I'm not sure what question. But yeah, so my idea was to consider, just to suggest the perspective of human life as not, as mostly sad, depressive, because we normally perceive it as a normal state is happiness, and sadness, it's deviations, something went wrong, extraordinary.
When you speak of the pathologization of sadness.
Yeah, of sadness. So the more realistic ways to perceive it as a continuum of pain, and in which happiness is also inevitable, because you can't be sad all the time. You will have some relief. There are some states that change, exchange each other, come on. Okay, there are some stages of it, and to feel sad, you need to feel happy sometimes, just to perceive it in a contrast. But just the main continuum is sadness is, and we know it from experience, not from just. And the problem with positive psychology, even the criticism of positive psychology is done now in the name of happiness, because Alenka's point of view, Alenka Župančić's point of view is that criticism, that by imposing this ideal of a constantly happy person, we making people even less happy, because they don't, when they feel unhappy, they feel even more unhappy because they don't coincide with the ethical idea. But this is still made in the name of happiness, so I guess, which is weird. In the name of happiness, so they will be less unhappy if they will get rid of.
But that would be a kind of a reverse political identification, that if I'm unhappy when everybody else who conforms to the given capitalist system of domination and exploitation, I should then be happy.
Yeah.
We have another question which I'll try to decode from Anna White. She says, if we cannot be interconnected, and there is no further explanation to that, how to explain what is happening when we entertain ideas of individuality? Is this notion even somehow, some way, a social one, the notion of individuality?
Yeah, so we can, it's possible to claim that there is no such thing as absence of interconnectivity, absence of sociality. Because even if we are kind of separated from others, even physically, even what we saw with social distancing and stuff, it's still a way to be, so separatedness, it's still a way to be connected. Maybe it's more dispersed way, or it's the line that separates you from the other individual, it's the same line that connects you. So it can be presented as a line of connection. In this way, the idea that we can somehow get rid of interconnectivity of sociality is an illusion, because when we are separated, and who we are, the individual as such, the language that we learn, that we speak, and the idea, our name, right, how we think about ourselves, even the idea of individual, it was from society, from our influence of those who take care of us, who teach us to speak this language. So there is no such thing as absence of interconnectivity.
Yes, I was reading a few days about possible behaviors among certain individuals who would like to have no absolute connections with any sociably translatable or referenceable relation, that would require still an action from the members of the community to leave that person quiet in a way. So in a sense, it's always sort of an interconnected relation, even when it is translated into a relation of negativity, of inaction towards someone else. And by now we are approaching to the end of the planned time for this lecture. If you don't have anything as final words to say, as we said in the beginning, we would be very happy when the conditions allow to host you in Skopje and also other speakers. And we will continue next week with the next guest lecture that we will announce very soon. And I know I'm aware that now at your place is getting pretty late. Thank you very much for your time and devotion and for sharing your thoughts with us. We hope to host you very soon in Skopje, and stay connected for all the others with the Crik Festival.
Thank you, Artan. Bye-bye.
Bye.